The Battle of Princeton, fought on January 3, 1777 in Princeton, New Jersey, was a response to the Continental Army's surprise victory at the Battle of Trenton just days before. Despite being smaller in scale than other key battles of the American Revolutionary War, Princeton had a disproportionately large impact on morale, recruitment, and the war's strategic trajectory. It was one of General George Washington's most brilliant tactical maneuvers, transforming a narrow opportunity into a symbolic and strategic victory that re-energized the American cause during one of its darkest periods. To understand the Battle of Princeton, one must go back to the last months of 1776, when the American Revolution was on the verge of collapse. Following defeats in New York, including at the battles of Long Island, Harlem Heights, White Plains, and Fort Washington, the Continental Army retreated through New Jersey and Pennsylvania. The British, led by General William Howe, appeared ready to crush the rebellion. Soldiers were deserting in droves, morale was low, and Washington's command was at risk. British and Hessian forces established winter garrisons throughout New Jersey, anticipating a lull in fighting. But Washington was determined to reverse the trend. On December 25, 1776, he crossed the ice-choked Delaware River and launched a surprise attack on the Hessian garrison at Trenton. The American victory at Trenton stunned the British and boosted the morale of both the American people and the army. On December 30th, Washington followed up on his success by recrossing the Delaware and capturing Trenton. General Charles Cornwallis, who had been preparing to sail for England, quickly mobilized 8,000 men and marched south to confront Washington's army, which was now stationed south of the Assunpink Creek. On January 2, 1777, the Second Battle of Trenton occurred. Cornwallis launched several attacks across the creek, but the Americans repelled each one. The fighting came to a halt as night fell. Cornwallis believed Washington was trapped and intended to resume the assault at dawn. However, Washington had no intention of being caught between Cornwallis's advancing troops and the British garrison at Princeton. That night, in one of the war's most skillful withdrawals, Washington quietly led his 5,000-man army northeast toward Princeton, leaving behind decoy campfires. He planned to surprise the British garrison, disrupt their communications and supply lines, and claim a second dramatic victory in as many weeks. As dawn broke on January 3, 1777, Washington's troops approached Princeton. At the same time, a British contingent led by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Mawhood had left Princeton and was marching south to reinforce Cornwallis at Trenton. Mawhood spotted the approaching American columns about 2 miles south of Princeton near Stony Brook. Realizing he was outnumbered, he returned to Princeton and prepared to fight, deploying his 1,200 troops to engage the advancing Americans. The leading American units, comprising militia under General Hugh Mercer, encountered Mawhood's force near William Clark's Orchard. Mercer ordered his men into position, but his troops, who were inexperienced primarily and under-equipped, were overwhelmed by British bayonet charges. During the fighting, General Mercer was surrounded, bayoneted several times, and abandoned for dead. The American line weakened and began to retreat. At this critical juncture, General Washington arrived on the battlefield with reinforcements, including Continentals under General John Cadwalader. Cadwalader's troops were initially hesitant after witnessing Mercer's retreat and the approaching British regulars. Washington acted decisively. He galloped to the front of the line, rallied the fleeing soldiers, and personally led the counterattack on Mawhood's force. According to eyewitnesses, Washington was only 30 yards from the British line when he ordered his troops to fire, with enemy muskets visible. Fortunately, he was unharmed. The sight of Washington on the front lines motivated the American soldiers. His presence turned the faltering attack into a successful charge. The Continental Army charged forward, engaging the British in hand-to-hand combat. Under intense pressure and outnumbered, Mawhood's troops began to break. Some fled to New Brunswick, while others attempted to escape via fields and roads. During the confusion, many British soldiers surrendered, and American forces pursued the fleeing enemy. Meanwhile, additional American troops led by General Nathanael Greene and Brigadier General Arthur St. Clair arrived and advanced towards Princeton. Another British detachment, led by Captain William Leslie, had taken up defensive positions near Nassau Hall, the main building of the College of New Jersey. Following a brief skirmish and a few cannon shots at Nassau Hall, one of which reportedly decapitated King George II's portrait, the British garrison surrendered. Overall, about 500 British soldiers were captured, wounded, or killed, compared to fewer than 100 American casualties. The victory at Princeton was quick but decisive. More than a battlefield victory, it was a daring maneuver that gave the Continental Army strategic breathing room while dealing a second blow to British prestige in a matter of days. Washington left Princeton because he was concerned about the threat posed by Cornwallis's larger force. Instead, he moved his army north into the hills of northern New Jersey, eventually wintering in Morristown. From this secure location, he could keep an eye on British movements while giving his exhausted troops some much-needed rest. The Battle of Princeton had numerous short and long-term effects on the Revolutionary War. First, it dispelled the myth of British invincibility. After months of defeats and retreats, the Continental Army had achieved 2 consecutive victories, capturing enemy soldiers, supplies, and equipment. When well led and strategically deployed, American forces could defeat professional European soldiers in open battle, as demonstrated by victories at Trenton and Princeton. Second, the victories boosted American morale and renewed public support for the war. The public, which had grown weary of the defeats in New York, reacted positively to the news. Recruitment increased, and many soldiers whose enlistments were about to expire chose to extend their service. The psychological impact of the victories helped save the Continental Army when it was on the verge of collapse. Third, the victories had diplomatic significance. Although France and Spain had not yet officially entered the war, foreign observers were closely watching the American performance on the battlefield. Trenton and Princeton demonstrated that the American cause was not hopeless, urging the French court to continue providing arms and financial assistance. These victories were critical stepping stones on the path to the Franco-American alliance in 1778. Fourth, the victories derailed British plans for the winter. Cornwallis, frustrated and surprised by Washington's move, abandoned many of his outposts in New Jersey and concentrated his forces in New Brunswick. The British had hoped to take firm control of New Jersey over the winter, but Washington's counter-offensive forced them to abandon much of their territory. By the end of January 1777, much of New Jersey had returned to Patriot control. Several key leaders made significant contributions to the Battle of Princeton. Chief among them was General George Washington, whose audacity, personal bravery, and strategic foresight transformed a perilous situation into a stunning success. His nighttime retreat from Trenton and surprise attack on Princeton are regarded as among the most brilliant military operations in history. Washington's ability to inspire his troops despite defeat and exhaustion was critical in transforming the army and public morale. Despite being mortally wounded, General Hugh Mercer played a heroic role early in the battle. Mercer, a close friend of Washington and a veteran of previous wars, rose to prominence due to his leadership and selflessness. Despite his militia's initial hesitancy, General John Cadwalader stood firm when reinforced, helping to stabilize the battle line. Generals Nathaniel Greene and Arthur St. Clair also provided timely reinforcements and leadership, which contributed to the American victory. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Mawhood of the British Army is deserving of recognition for his bravery and tactical abilities. Despite being outnumbered and caught off guard, he launched aggressive counterattacks that initially defeated the American militia. His ability to rally his troops under pressure and resist Washington's advance prevented a complete collapse of his forces. However, without reinforcements and facing the full weight of the Continental Army, Mawhood was forced to retreat. The Battle of Princeton also left a lasting impression on American memory. Along with Trenton, it is frequently cited as a watershed moment in the Revolutionary War. The two battles, which took place within 10 days of each other, mark the pinnacle of what historians call the 10 Crucial Days, a period that reshaped the course of the war and preserved the American fight for independence. The image of Washington rallying his troops at Princeton has become iconic, appearing in paintings and popular culture for generations. Nassau Hall, the college building where part of the final skirmish took place, still stands today and serves as a symbol of the American Revolution's influence on everyday civic life. The Continental Congress met briefly in Princeton in 1783, emphasizing the town's symbolic and political significance. The strategic outcome of the Battle of Princeton also influenced Washington's changing approach to warfare. He increasingly avoided large-scale confrontations that could destroy his army, preferring mobility, surprise, and exploiting British vulnerabilities. This strategy would be helpful in subsequent campaigns, particularly in the Southern Theater and the decisive victory at Yorktown in 1781. In a broader sense, the battle demonstrated the importance of initiative and seizing opportunities in warfare. Washington's refusal to remain passive in the winter combined with his ability to execute complex maneuvers in adverse conditions, signaled a shift in how the Continental Army fought. It demonstrated that success was more than just numbers or firepower. It was also about leadership, timing, and moral resolve. The Battle of Princeton was much more than a minor skirmish. It was a triumph of leadership, strategy, and spirit. Following the victory at Trenton, it cemented General Washington's status as the Revolution's undisputed leader. It saved the army from disintegration, revitalized the revolutionary cause, and forced the British to reconsider their war strategy. Despite being fought in the snow-covered fields of central New Jersey in the dead of winter, the Battle of Princeton had far-reaching consequences for the colonies and the world. It remains a shining example of how bravery, determination, and astute leadership can change the course of history.